Jam Vishapad Paramahansa Parivrajakacarya Stotra Rishat Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jam Vishapad Paramahansa Parivrajakacarya Stotra Rishat Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Jai. Granth-raj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Reading from Canto 3, Chapter 29, Text 17. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nashtaprayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Canto 3, entitled Status Quo, Chapter 29, entitled Explanation of Devotional Service, text number 17. Mahatam Bahumanena Deenanam Anukampaya Maitreya Chaivatma Tulyeshu Yamena Niyamena Cha Mahatam Bahumanena Deenanam Anukampaya Maitreya Chaivatma Tulyeshu Yamena Niyamena Cha Mahatam Bahumanena Deenanam Anukampaya Maitreya Chaivatma Tulyeshu Yamena Niyamena Cha. Mahatam Bahumanena Deenanam Anukampaya Maitreya Chaivatma Tulyeshu Yamena Niyamena Cha. Maitreya Chaivatma Tulyeshu Yamena Niyamena Cha. Mahatam Bahumanena Deenanam Anukampaya Maitreya Chaivatma Tulyeshu Yamena Niyamena Cha. Mahatam Bahumanena Deenanam Anukampaya Maitreya Chaivatma Tulyeshu Yamena Niyamena Cha. Vaishnavis. Mahatam Bahumanena Deenanam Anukampaya Maitreya Chaivatma Tulyeshu Yamena Niyamena Cha. Mahatam Bahumanena Deenanam Anukampaya Maitreya chaivatma tulyeshu yamena niyamena cha. Synonyms. Mahatam, to the great souls. Bahumanena, with great respect. Deenanam, to the poor. Anukampaya, with compassion. Maitreya, with friendship. Cha, also. Eva, certainly. Atmatulyeshu, to persons who are equals. Yamena, with control of the senses. Niyamena, with regulation. Cha, end. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The pure devotee should execute devotional service by giving the greatest respect to the spiritual master and the acharyas. He should be compassionate to the poor and make friendship with persons who are his equals. But all his activities should be executed under regulation and with control of the senses. Please repeat. The pure devotee should execute devotional service by giving the greatest respect to the spiritual master and the acharyas. He should be compassionate to the poor and make friendship with persons who are his equals. But all his activities should be executed under regulation and with control of the senses. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, 13th chapter, it is clearly stated that one should execute devotional service and advance on the path of spiritual knowledge by accepting the Acharya. Acharyopasanam. One should worship an Acharya, a spiritual master who knows things as they are. The spiritual master must be in the disciplic succession from Krishna. The predecessors of the spiritual master are his spiritual master, his grand spiritual master, his great grand spiritual master, and so on, who form the disciplic succession of acharyas. It is recommended herewith that all the acharyas be given the highest respect. It is stated, Gurushu Nara Matihi. Gurushu means unto the acharyas, and Naramati means thinking like a common man. To think of the Vaishnavas, the devotees, as belonging to a particular caste or community, to think of the acharyas as ordinary men, or to think of the deity in the temple as being made of stone, wood, or metal is condemned. Niyamena, one should offer the greatest respect to the acharyas according to the standard regulations. A devotee should also be compassionate to the poor. This does not refer to those who are poverty-stricken materially. According to devotional vision, a man is poor if he is not in Krishna consciousness. A man may be very rich materially, but if he is not Krishna conscious, he is considered poor. On the other hand, many acharyas such as Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami used to live beneath trees every night. Superficially, it appeared that they were poverty-stricken, but from their writings, we can understand that in spiritual life, they were the richest personalities. A devotee shows compassion to those poor souls who are wanting in spiritual knowledge by enlightening them in order to elevate them to Krishna consciousness. That is one of the duties of a devotee. He should also make friendship with persons who are on an equal level with himself or who have the same understanding that he does. For a devotee, there is no point in making friendships with ordinary persons. He should make friendship with other devotees so that by discussing among themselves, they may elevate one another on the path of spiritual understanding. This is Ishtagoshti. In Bhagavad Gita, there is reference to Bodhayanta Parasparam, discussing among themselves. Generally, pure devotees utilize their valuable time in chanting and discussing various activities of Lord Krishna or Lord Chaitanya amongst themselves. There are innumerable books such as the Purans, Mahabharata, Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and Upanishads, which contain countless subjects for discussion among two devotees or more. Friendship should be cemented between persons with mutual interests and understanding. Such persons are said to be Swajati, of the same caste. The devotee should avoid a person whose character is not fixed in the standard understanding. Even though he may be a Vaishnava or a devotee of Krishna, if his character is not correctly representative, then he should be avoided. One should steadily control the senses and the mind and strictly follow the rules and regulations. And he should make friendship with persons of the same standard. Translation once again. The pure devotee should execute devotional service by giving the greatest respect to the spiritual master and the acharyas. He should be compassionate to the poor and make friendship with persons who are his equals. But all his activities should be executed under regulation and with control of the senses. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. It is such an honor to be able to recite the Bhagavatam and give our realization and share amongst ourselves here. So I'm very grateful here. So in this brilliant purport, we are continuing Lord Kapila's instructions to his mother, Mother Devhuti. And in this particular translation and purport, there are a lot of key words. I try to look for keywords when I read the purport. And there's several in here, as mentioned in the translation. We have to give the greatest respect to the spiritual master and the acharyas. We have to be compassionate to the poor. We have to make friendship with persons who share similar inclinations, same ideas, and same qualities. All our activities should be executed under very rigorous rules and regulations, following the scriptural injunctions. We have to have complete faith in the disciplic succession and follow that succession, coming originally from Krishna. And finally, we should not regard the Guru or the Vaishnavas as ordinary individuals. In fact, that is a major offense. So we'll look at each one of these points very carefully. We'll start with greatest respect to the Guru and the Acharyas. It's very important to understand that in our lineage, our Vaishnava Sampradaya, all our knowledge is coming from the Vaishnavas. All our knowledge is coming from the Acharyas, predominantly the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, who were instructed by Lord Chaitanya to actually reveal the pastimes of Shri Radha and Krishna and write books. And for those of us who have read Srila Rupa Goswami's and Srila Sanatana Goswami's literature, they are just jewels, complete jewels. There's poetry, there's knowledge, there's philosophy, there's stories. So all these books which are given to us by the Acharyas are to be respected equally as the way we respect the Acharyas. And when I was meditating on this particular keyword and this key point, I was thinking immediately of Srila Narottam Das Thakur. How he was so determined to have Lokanath Goswami as a spiritual master. And when he approached Srila Lokanath Goswami said, no, I am not going to initiate anybody. In the similar vein that Srila Gaurakishora Das Babaji Maharaj had told Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj. But Narottam Das Thakur was so determined and so adamant to have Lokanath Maharaj as his guru that he resolved that I will start cleaning the place where Lokanath Goswami actually conducts his ablutions and his toilet. And he would get up in the middle of the night at midnight and go to the place, the toilet of his guru, so his not yet guru but aspiring guru, and he would clean it every single night. And when Lokanath Maharaj would get up in the morning, he would see the area where the toilet is done spectacularly clean, and he would be very impressed. Who is cleaning this? So he decided one day that I will come and hide myself and get up in the middle of the night and watch who is doing this. And so he hid himself, and he saw when it was midnight, Narottam Das Thakur would come in a very humble spirit and completely clean that area. That was his Guru Bhavna of having Lokanath Swami as his Guru. And when Lokanath Swami saw that, his heart melted and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, yes, I will accept you as my disciple. So this is the level of determination that Narottam Das Thakur had. Respect is something, but this is the determination he had to have Lokanath Swami as his Guru. Extremely important to understand. Then the second point is, we should be compassionate to the poor. And this is really important, where Srila Prabhupada emphasizes, we are not talking about people being materially poor. We're talking about spiritual poverty here. And it is specifically mentioned in the purport that a person who is devoid of Krishna consciousness is actually the poorest in the world today. And so we have to give, in fact, our movement is a preaching movement, where we have to give the knowledge of the books. We have so many book distributors here in the room. They've been distributing books for 45, 50 years. They're giving the knowledge to the people who are actually poor. That means they are lacking Krishna consciousness here. And we see examples of Sri Prahlad Maharaj, who was giving the knowledge to his schoolmates, and they were barely 5 or 6 years old. So Prahlad Maharaj at a very young age understood that my schoolmates, my classmates are spiritually poor, and he was trying to educate them about the glories of Krishna. In a similar vein, we know that Parikshit Maharaj, when he was given the curse of living for 7 days, he immediately resorted to gain knowledge. And he went to Sukadev Goswami, and Sukadev Goswami gave him the knowledge, because the spiritual knowledge is the most important, and that can make us the richest here. So compassionate to the poor means we should approach each and every person who is lacking in knowledge, including ourselves. We are not saying that we are spiritually completely advanced. We are also in short in knowledge. It takes lifetimes to read all these Vedas and all these Purans and all the knowledge that has been given to us. And now we are so blessed that all the knowledge which is coming from the Acharyas is being translated into a language that we can readily adopt. So we don't even have an excuse that I do not know Hindi or Sanskrit and I cannot understand the scriptures. The scriptures are available to us by the grace of Srila Prabhupada in almost every language. I think more than 50 or 55 languages. It's absolutely incredible. And then the third point is, all our activities should be executed under regulation and with control of the senses. This is an extremely important principle in our devotional career. Regulation, following regulations as given to us in these scriptures, not making our own regulations and not speculating on what I'm supposed to do with myself. We have to follow the scriptural injunctions here and control our senses. In fact, when I was driving this morning, there was a big truck in front of me. It was a very, very slow traffic, so I had an opportunity to read everything that was written on the back of that truck. And the truck had written automated control of mosquitoes, flies, and other pests. So I was just thinking how nice it is if we could have automated control of our own material senses, but that's not possible. We have to control our senses. There can be no automation there. Regardless of how robotic we are getting in the society today, in fact, robots are everywhere, and how artificial intelligence is so-called taking over natural intelligence, that will never happen. Because a machine does not have emotion. They can do everything you want them to do, but they do not have emotion. So automated control will not happen in our lives. We have to make the effort to control all our senses, whether they are the 5 gross senses or the 3 subtle senses. And then another point is that we have to make friendship with persons who are our equals. So we're not talking about material equality here, that I am on this position, so I should make friendship only with those people who are materially on the same level as me. We have to make friendship with people who share the same ideology, regardless of their standing. So our ideology is rendering service to Lord Krishna. So people who have the same ideology, that means engage themselves in devotional service, offer service to the Vaishnavas, pray to the acharyas, basically follow a life of Krishna consciousness, those persons are regarded as our friends and we should make friendship with them. It is mentioned here how a devotee deals with 3 or 4 different kinds of people. To our superiors, we have to render full respect and full service. To our equals, we make friendship, and so we reveal our hearts to them, he or her. To our juniors who are still budding or growing in Krishna consciousness, we should offer a complete compassion and kindness. And for those who are envious, envy is a very, very bad emotion. In fact, it is said it is very difficult to let go of envy. And for those who are envious, who are transgressing the boundaries of what is right and what is wrong, we should actually avoid them. And it is mentioned here in the purport for that even if a person is Vaishnava, if his or her character is not representative of Krishna consciousness, we should avoid that person. We cannot offend that person because that person is a Vaishnava, has chanted the holy name of the Lord, but we do not need to associate that with that person because the character is full of ambiguity here. So that's actually mentioned here. And then another word which is used in the purport is acharyopasanam, which means one should offer worship to an acharya and a guru. So guru is not Krishna. Guru is a representative of Krishna, so it's very important to understand that. In fact, some new people who come here to the temple, they ask, who is Srila Prabhupada? They don't know. And we have to tell them this is a guru, and without offering worship and prayers and seeking blessings from the guru, we cannot approach Krishna. And sometimes they ask that why do you offer worship to someone who is a human? And we have to explain to them they are not God, but they are representatives of God. And since they are representing Krishna, we also have to offer worship and respect to them. So it has to be, this kind of education has to be given, otherwise people through their speculative understanding can actually have a very negative connotation of what is being done here. Then another point here is we should not regard Guru to be a common man here. A Guru is a supreme position here. In fact, there are 3 kinds of devotees here, Uttama Adhikari, Madhyam Adhikari, and the neophyte, Kanishta Adhikari. And Srila Rupa Goswami actually gives very, very clear distinction if one has to understand how are these 3 different here. The first class devotee, the Uttama Adhikari, is someone who knows the scriptures very, very well, is a complete expert in not only understanding the scriptures, but also offering arguments to others when they raise their arguments. They are very expert in arguing and counter-arguing. Number 2, they regard each and every person through the soul. They don't look at the external body. They look at the soul residing within that, and they give knowledge to each and every person. Thirdly, which is very important, is they have complete faith in the Lord and the scriptures. So 3 points which ornaments an Uttama Adhikari is full faith, full knowledge of the scriptures, and not being situated on the bodily platform. And it is mentioned that such Uttama Adhikaris are qualified to become spiritual masters because they have to give knowledge to the others. The second class is the Madhyam Adhikari, which is the middle level here. And it is mentioned in the scriptures, the Madhyam Adhikari has full faith in the deity and the scriptures, but they may not be expert in offering arguments. If somebody argues with them about the scriptures, they may not be an expert. But their faith is very, very strong. And they still read the scriptures, but they may not be able to be fully argumentative in terms of expertise. And the third one is the neophyte or the Kanishta Adhikari, where their faith is not strong, their knowledge is not strong, although they may be striving to do so, but their faith can be easily changed through deviant philosophies. So neophyte devotees have to make an effort to always associate with Madhyam Adhikaris and Uttama Adhikaris, because since their faith is pliable and their knowledge is not very strong, they can actually be led away from the path of Krishna consciousness. So these are the 3 different kinds of devotees. And it is mentioned here, it's very important, how Guru has to be respected, not like a common man, but given the same level of respect as we give to Krishna. And it's very interesting when I was reading examples of, in our scriptures, which personalities actually went away against the order of the Guru. I was immediately thinking of Bali Maharaj, who Shukracharya had told him, do not give anything to this little dwarf who's coming here asking you for charity, because this little dwarf is actually Vishnu in disguise. And Bali Maharaj, being so magnanimous and so generous, actually disobeyed the order of his guru, Shukracharya, and he gave what Lord Vamandev wanted. And as a result of that, he was actually, he was given a blessing by Vamandev that he was thrown to Patal, but Vamandev actually resolved to serve as his doorkeeper. And another example that came to my mind as I was doing my research here, that Bhishma's Gurudev was Parashuram, who fought with the Kshatriyas 21 times. Very, very powerful, Brahman and Kshatriya together. And Bhishma actually fought with his Guru. What to speak of not obeying the order of the Guru? He actually fought with the Guru arms in arms. And there's a whole story here which is very interesting, where Bhishma had taken a vow of never marrying anyone, maintaining a vow of celibacy because he wanted to satisfy his father's desire to marry. And it is mentioned when Bhishma kidnapped the three queens, Amba, Ambika and Ambalika, we know that Amba had already given her heart to some other prince. So Bhishma resorted to take her back to the kingdom, and her so-called fiancé, so to speak, did not accept Amba back and said, an external man has touched you, so I will not be able to accept you right now. And so Amba goes back to Bhishma and says, now my so-called fiancé will not accept me because you have already touched me. And you know, he was kidnapping and he touched those princes while taking them on his chariot. And so Amba says, you should marry me now because I have no place to go. My parents have rejected me. My fiancé-to-be has rejected me, so you're my only solace here, so please marry me. And Bhishma says, no, I cannot marry you because I've taken a vow of celibacy. And Amba gets livid. And she prays and she tells Parashuram that this has happened. And Parashuram goes to Bhishma and says, you must marry Amba because now she has no place to go. She is nowhere to go. And Bhishma says, I cannot marry her because of my vow. And then there is a big battle between Bhishma and the Guru Parashuram. And they fought for a very long time. And it is mentioned Bhishma was actually able to vanquish Parashuram. So we have so many wonderful examples. For us, we should not think that we are at a level where we can also disobey our Guru as Bali Maharaj had done. We are very, very materially conditioned. And these are all wonderful pastimes of the Lord, and there is a whole principle, there is a whole reason behind why all this is being done. So for us, we must regard the Guru as worshipable as Lord Krishna himself. In fact, Srila Narottam Das Thakur has says, and we chant this every single day, Chakshu Dan Dilaye Janme Janme Prabhu Say. We sing this every day. The spiritual Guru or the spiritual master gives spiritual insight to the disciple, and therefore the Guru should be considered his master life after life. In a similar vein, we know Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has said, Yasya prasadan bhagavat prasado yasya prasadan nagati kutopi. We sing this every day, but it's nice to also meditate on the English translation here. At least I speak for myself. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one is benedicted by the mercy of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement here. In fact, it is said here, by the mercy of the Guru, even a dumb person can become the greatest orator, and even a lame man can cross mountains. This is the mercy of the spiritual master here. And another point which is mentioned here is we should never regard the devotees to belong to a specific community, specific race, specific geographical location, specific color, or specific caste. All Vaishnavas are equal because they are rendering service to Lord Krishna. In fact, when we talk about our disciplic succession, we have to understand that there are 4 bona fide disciplic successions. It is mentioned here in Garga Samhita 1061 also, and also given to us by our acharyas. There are 4 bona fide coming from Lord Brahma, Lord Rudra, Mother Lakshmi, and the 4 Kumars. And they are referred to as, the acharyas which are propounding these 4 bona fide sampradayas are Vishnu Swami, Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, and the and Nimbarkacharya. So if we take shelter of any one of these bona fide sampradayas, we can be assured that our life is following a bona fide trajectory. But for us, as given to us by Lord Chaitanya and Srila Prabhupada, we are in the line of Brahma, Madhava, Gaudiya, Vaishnava, Sampradaya. So all of them are actually bona fide here. Then other points which are mentioned here are acharyas are also not ordinary men. And it is mentioned here, I was reading how, and this is told by various disciples, and I'm sure Archita Prabhu and Bhrigupati Prabhu and Naikatma Prabhu can attest to this. When I read the memories of Srila Prabhupada, which Siddhanta Prabhu has compiled very beautifully, so many direct disciples have said that when they saw Srila Prabhupada walking on the road on a pathway, they actually said in their word, they thought he was floating, he's not even walking, and there was a glow around him. There was a massive golden glow around him. And he looked like so ethereal and coming from the transcendental world. This is actually the power, the glory of the acharyas, where they do not look or behave like ordinary men. They may look like they are human beings, but they are actually sent by Lord Krishna for a very specific purpose on this material planet to fulfill that purpose. And Srila Prabhupada is one of them here. And from my personal principle, one place that strikes me as extremely powerful in Vrindavan, of course Vrindavan is completely powerful in terms of devotional cadre, but when I go to, I believe it's Shri Shri Radha Gokulanand temple, where all the samadhis of a lot of our acharyas are there, particularly Lokanath Goswami's samadhi. The moment you enter that samadhi area, you feel like you're totally out of this world. It's covered over on all sides by tulsi. There are a lot of samadhis. It is completely silent there. Even devotees who come, like 50 or 100 devotees, everybody is silent. And they're just paying their obeisances to the samadhis. They're sitting and chanting their gayatris or chanting their rounds. And that atmosphere is absolutely amazing. In fact, you can have goosebumps sitting there. Not even looking at the deities, just the power of all the acharyas around you, you can see. It is such a big blessing to sit there. And one can sit there forever and meditate on the samadhis, on the deities, on what these acharyas have given to us in terms of scriptures and their supreme blessings. So this is another point, that our acharyas are very, very, very special souls, and we should not regard them as ordinary individuals. Another point which is mentioned here is that the deity is not made of stone or wood or metal. Otherwise, we would start regarding the deity as a statue. In fact, it is very, very common in India, in the general population, to never use the word deity. In fact, they use the word idols. An idol is very offensive. And we have to correct them and say this is not an idol. It is a deity. And deity is sanctioned through various regulations and rituals that Krishna personally descends in the deity. So Dwarkadhish is Krishna himself standing on the altar. That is there. And there is a very, very sweet story how a person, a poor Brahmin, never ever regarded a deity as being made up of stone or metal or wood or whatever. And everybody knows the story, but I'm just going to recount it. This is the Sakshi Gopal story, we all know this, where an elderly Brahmin and a young Brahmin, they set out from South India, from a place known as Vidyanagar, to go to North India and particularly visit Vrindavan Dham. And so during this very long journey, the young Brahmin was serving the elderly Brahmin very nicely. He was, cooking for him, he was massaging his feet, he was doing basically menial service. And once they got to Vrindavan, the elderly Brahmin was very, very touched by the service that the younger Brahmin has rendered to him. And he said, I am very pleased by your service, and because you have been so kind to me, I resolved to give my daughter in marriage to you. And the young Brahmin, who was very poor, he asked the elderly Brahmin, this does not seem like a transaction between equals, because I'm so poor and you're probably very well off. Are you sure about this? And the elderly Brahmin says, yes, I am very attracted by your devotional service and your humility and submissiveness, and I want to give my daughter to you. And this young Brahmin says, okay, I just want to make sure you don't move away from your promise. So please, let's go to the temple of Gopal, and you make this promise in front of Gopal deity that you will give your daughter to me. And so the Gopal deity becomes a witness, Sakshi. that in front of Gopal's deity, the elderly Brahmin makes a promise, I give my daughter to you. And so the pilgrimage is over and they go back to South India to their Vidyanagar. And time passes. And then the elderly Brahmin realizes, I made a promise and I made a vow. And because he was a Brahmin, Brahmins are supposed to make sure whatever they speak is the truth and they should not go away from their promise. And so he says, yeah, I resolved to give my daughter to this young Brahmin, so I should follow up on my promise. So he calls his wife and his son and he tells him what happened, and now it's time to give our daughter away to this young Brahmin. And immediately the wife says, no, this young Brahmin is so poor, he has nothing. How will he look after my daughter? And the son also says, Father, how dare you make this promise? This young Brahmin is so poor, how can I give my sister away to this poor, so-called illiterate Brahmin? And now the elderly Brahmin is in a fix because he wants to follow up on his promise, but his wife says that if you give away our daughter to this elderly Brahmin, I will commit suicide, essentially. This is what he says. And so now the young Brahmin comes and says, it is time for you to, give your daughter away to me in charity, and I will have her as my wife. And so the son, who is very evil-minded, the son of the elderly Brahmin, tells the elderly Brahmin in confidence, just tell the young Brahmin that you don't remember making this promise. And so the elderly Brahmin goes and says, what promise? I don't remember making a promise. Although internally he is suffering because he knows he's made that promise. And the young Brahmin says, of course, how can you forget? You made that promise in front of the Gopal deity, and Gopal is a witness. So the son, who is very envious, comes, and now by this time the entire village has gathered because the young Brahmin is advocating for himself and telling the villagers, this elderly Brahmin made a promise and is now not giving me his daughter. So the son says, this young Brahmin is a liar, he's a cheat, he's cheating my elderly father. What promise did he make? To whom did he make this promise? And so the young Brahmin says, the elderly Brahmin made this promise in front of Gopal deity. So Gopal is the witness. So elderly Brahmin says, okay, if Gopal deity comes and confirms that he is the witness, I am more than happy to give my daughter away. And the young Brahmin says, I will go and get Gopal for you. And now the villagers are kind of dubious. How is this possible? What is happening here? Because the envious son has set a doubt in the mind of the villagers. So this young Brahmin goes back to Vrindavan and goes to the deity of Gopal and explains the whole situation, that you were the witness, but the elderly Brahmin is no longer giving me his daughter. So please, you come with me and tell everybody that you are my witness. And the Gopal deity says, how is this possible? How can I move away from here? A deity doesn't move away once situated. And the young Brahmin says, well, if you can talk to me, you can also walk. And so Gopal deity actually starts walking behind this young Brahmin all the way to Vidyanagar, South India, under one condition, that as you're walking, I'm walking behind you, but you should not turn around. And you will know that I'm walking behind you because of the tingling of my ankle bells. But please make sure you don't turn around. And every day you should cook 1 kilogram of rice for me and offer it to me. And so they're walking, tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. So he knows Krishna is walking behind him. And once he reaches the border of his village, he knows that he's already reached his village. He turns around and Gopal freezes right there, because that was the injunction given by Krishna, that wherever, if you look behind me, I will situate myself. And of course, because he had reached the village, all the villagers gathered there, and actually Gopal bore witness that this elderly Brahmin had given a promise that he would give his daughter away. And so, of course, the rest is history. The daughter was given, and everybody fell at the lotus feet of Gopal. So this is the faith that this young poor Brahmin, although not poor, materially poor Brahmin, had. He never ever regarded the deity as being made up of a stone or wood. In fact, he was talking, he said, you're the witness, you have to come and protect me. So this is the way we should be looking at the deity, a personality of Godhead who is listening to our prayers. In fact, Shri Rukmini Dwarka Nath talked to Srila Prabhupada when Srila Prabhupada was praying to them, and they gave him the order, go back to India. And that's how the Indian Krishna consciousness movement exploded there. It grew so much This is a personal order given by Srila Rukmini Dwarkanath, our little deities. So I just want to end the class here by summarizing these points, very, very important points, following rules and regulations, not considering the spiritual master as an ordinary being, giving full respect to the acharyas, not regarding the deity as something which is very idealistic, and also giving Krishna consciousness to people who are spiritually very, very poor. Not materially poor. Materially poor, of course, we give, but being spiritually poor is much more important for us here. So with this, I would like to end our Bhakti class, and if there are any questions or comments or even corrections, please feel free to do so. Yes.
Thank you for that. It's very well organized. I'm an old writing teacher. I noted this was like an essay. It was well structured. There are two things that came to my mind. I want to make these points quickly. One is I was really happy when you brought up Bali Maharaj with regard to, following the instructions of the Guru, because I remember hearing a lecture years ago where Srila Prabhupada said that Bali Maharaj declined to follow the instruction of his Guru, the misguided instructions of his Guru. He said, therefore he is Mahajan. Because he disobeyed his spiritual master, he is a Mahajan. So I always found that really striking. Another is when in the middle of the last purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about friendship among devotees. And he says, it should be cemented between persons with mutual interests and understanding. Such people are said to be swajati, or of the same caste. And this reminded me of Srila Rupa Goswami's instruction when he presents the anga of sadhu sangha among the 64 angas of sadhana bhakti. And he says there are three characteristics for the association that we should be seeking. He says it very simply, svajati ashaye snigdhe sadhu sangha svatovare. So three things. One is svajati ashaye, that same caste. Jata has to do with birth, family, class, kind. So sometimes we say we want the association of devotees who are like-minded. I prefer to say like-hearted, because I think it's more to the point. And snigdhe, affectionately disposed, because otherwise, why would you bother? If they're not affectionately disposed toward you, then why do you want their company? And svatovare, svata has, it means ourselves, and vara means superior. So we want the association of devotees who share our spiritual aspirations, who share affection with us, and who are at least a little more advanced than we are. So I was just thinking of those as you were giving your class. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That's very insightful.
We've got Kumi and Rabindranath.
Sure.
Which one do you want to go first?
We'll take Rabindranath.
Yeah, you mentioned that pastime of the deity coming, walking behind the Brahmana. So you mentioned the two types of Brahmana. One was rich and one was poor. So how we understand that a Brahmin is rich? Because a Brahmin is they're poor by nature. Just like Prabhupada says, if a Brahmin gets a lakh of rupees during the day, he's a poor man at night because he gives away all his money in charity.
Thank you, Prabhu. So with regard to this specific story, when they were both Brahmins, the elderly Brahmin was rich. Richness in this particular story was with regard to his material possessions. So he was probably well off, whereas the young Brahmin, who was unmarried, was materially poor, but in terms of spiritual knowledge, both of them were equally rich. And coming back to your point, where Brahmins may get lots of dakshina or donation, and they give it all away. So material richness has no meaning for a Brahmin, because for a Brahmin, the greatest source of treasure is the knowledge here. So I hope I'm getting your question.
No, and I understand that. Real wealth is in knowledge and spiritual life. But how is it Brahman is even described as rich in material possessions? Because he's always giving, he's poverty-stricken by nature. I'm just trying to understand that.
Brought him into a room and they said, "Here's a fireplace, Prabhupada. So you can, this room will stay nice and warm." Prabhupada said, "Vaishnavas don't burn wood, they wear a chadar." So does that mean anybody who, does anything to warm themselves other than wear a chadar is not a Vaishnav? I don't think that's what Prabhupada's trying to say. I think in the way he's saying it, it's an ideal standard. Ideally, a Brahmin, whatever money he gets, he gives away in charity. But, we read in the books, there's Brahmins who have some money, they have some wealth. It's not like they're not Brahmins, but the ideal standard is there. That's my understanding of it, that particular question, responding to Rabindranath's question.
Thank you. And I would also add to that, based on my understanding in reading Srila Prabhupada's books, that regardless of, even if we are Brahmins, if we have wealth, so-called wealth and material possessions, we actually dovetail each of our items in Krishna's service. So there's nothing wrong in having the wealth, it is how we use that wealth which is very important. So there are a lot of Brahmins today who are extremely wealthy. We have in fact so many of them in our movement who have taken Brahminical initiation, and they are at very, very high positions in the society. They are billionaires, so to speak, but they're using their wealth in Krishna's service. So dovetailing, I really like that word, dovetailing everything in Krishna's service is the mood of what we call vairagya. We know Gyan and vairagya is so important, but vairagya doesn't mean giving up everything and sitting in a cave, because that will not expand Krishna consciousness. So Gyan and vairagya is using the correct knowledge given to us to understand what real vairagya is. Not being attached to material possessions, regardless of a position in the society, but using it for Krishna's service. So thank you for that point.
Hare Krishna, thank you for such a wonderful class. I had a question about one of the stories in the Mahabharata, and I don't know if it's important or not, but you had mentioned that Bhishma had vanquished his guru at the end of the fight. And I know that there are many versions of the Mahabharata, and different stories tell different ways. One version I heard was that Lord Shiva appeared after the 21 days to end the fight, so no one won. But and then Amba was able to start worshiping Lord Shiva, and he blessed her with the boon to kill Bhishma in the later lifetime. So is that point important, that Bhishma conquered the guru or not? Or
yeah, I actually thank you so much, Kumi. Yeah, I read both the versions. In fact, that Bhishma defeated Parashuram, and in the second one, like you said very correctly, Lord Shiva came and stopped the fight. But I think regardless of who defeated whom, the more important point is that a disciple is fighting with his guru. I think that's very hard for us to grasp and to digest, that a disciple could actually fight and raise arms against the guru. So that was the point that I was trying to make here. But yeah, I think the end message is the same, regardless of who won or whether there was a neutral compromise that was reached as a result of Lord Shiva. But just the fact, just to even think about it, when we know we have to worship the guru as a representative of Krishna, what to speak of actually fighting with the guru? That's quite amazing. And disobeying the orders of the guru. So thank you for your point. But yeah, I've read
thank
both
you so
versions.
much.
Yes, Prabhu, please.
Just in case it didn't come out overall sound, I think Rabindranath made it was an astute observation, and it's a valid point that Brahmins ideally, should be on that standard of very living, simple living. They're the personification of the example of simple living but high thinking. So it is a valid point. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other points or corrections? Thank you so much. Grantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai.